false. And
How do we make sure we're getting the full story?
Party moved in.
And what challenges do we face to get it? It all starts right now. And it all starts from right here at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg. This is a spectacular architectural building, but it's also spectacular inside for its exhibits. And if you're ever in Winnipeg, please find yourself the opportunity to come by here. We're just in one small part of this museum. It's quite something. I'm Peter Mansbridge. We're looking forward to this next 90 minutes or so, taking your questions on the subject you just heard outlined. And we'll be taking your questions live here in the room in Winnipeg, but also off the comments section of both Facebook Live and YouTube. So if you're watching on one of those platforms anywhere in the world, don't be shy, send in your questions. And obviously our audience here in Winnipeg is primed to ask questions as well. This is the fourth in a series of these town halls, really, that we've been doing. We call them National Conversations. We started in Vancouver, then we were in Charlottetown, then London, and now here in Winnipeg. I want to introduce very quickly to you our panel for tonight, all people with lots of experience in the field of journalism, in the field of telling stories. That's our business. We tell stories, and many of them are challenging to tell. These people have found ways to tell them in very different ways and exciting ways, all in ways that you've shown over the years that you much appreciate. Let me start with Diana Swain, who's no stranger here in Winnipeg, former host of the local supper hour show, national reporter for us here in Manitoba, now the host of The Investigators on CBC News Network, and also one of our lead investigative reporters. Rosemary Barton, another product of Manitoba, who's the host of, yes, you brought the family, Rosie? The host of Power and Politics in Ottawa, one of the most important programs on CBC News Network, looking at on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, the goings-on in our nation's capital and on Parliament Hill. Duncan McCue, the host of Cross Country Checkup, and somebody who contributes regularly to the National with his documentary-style journalism. Paul Hunter, our Washington correspondent, who's flown up here today to be a part of this discussion because, you know, there's not much going on in Washington. So why couldn't he be here? Adrienne Arsenault, recently back from the Philippines, travels the world for us constantly, based in Toronto, does some of the challenging stories in terms of trying to get at the heart of an issue and trying to reflect all sides of it, and that's one of the things we're going to try and discuss tonight. Adrienne's here. And finally, Nahlah Ayed, who's flown over from London, from our London bureau. Nahlah, we see her in London quite frequently, but we see her in all other parts of the world as well, as she does her amazing work as one of our lead foreign correspondents. So we've got quite the lineup of journalists for you tonight to try and handle some of these questions that I'm sure you have. And I think we can start right here in the audience with our first question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, good evening, Peter, and all of you, each of you, to Winnipeg and to this great Museum of Human Rights. And my question has to do with truth. There are so many different perspectives of truth, and I wondered maybe one of the field correspondents, Adrienne or Nahlah, and hopefully Rosie as well, back at Power and Politics. Just even yesterday you were saying you need a flow chart to understand all of this. So I was hoping that you could try to shed some light on how do you discern, what would be your criteria in discerning truth?
Well, it's a great question, and it's obviously one of the ones that all of our journalists face every day in telling stories, whether they're one of these six or whether they're one of the CBC journalists across the country and including here in Winnipeg. But you suggested we start with Rosie, so let's do that, because that's her daily challenge, is trying to get to the truth on some of those stories that come off of Parliament Hill, where there are many times when nobody believes what they're hearing, and Rosie's got to get through that, wade through it to find out the truth.
Yeah, so that is my job, is to make sure that you guys get the information you need and that they don't, I wouldn't say that they're trying to, wouldn't say that they're lying or anything. They're just trying to tell the story from their perspective, right? And leave out the parts that don't matter to advancing their political agendas. So how do I do it? I'm not going to lie. I don't do it by myself. Because I have a show, I have a lot of people that prepare me behind the scenes with facts and numbers and information so that I can be armed, is sort of the way I put it. That when I go into interviews with people who I know are going to be mostly difficult and mostly want to tell the story a particular way, I have ways to push back. And the other thing that I do is when I know it's not true, I say it, because I think that that's important. That's my job too. It's not just to allow someone to get away saying things that are simply wrong. You also have to call it out. I think right now, and Paul maybe can speak better to this, there is a perception that you are allowed to say that something is fake news because you disagree with it. That's not actually true. There are actually facts that are indisputable and there are truths that matter. So people can try and frame a story and say that it's fake, but it's our job to make sure that we redirect them and point them to the things that are true. The sky is blue. That's it.
All right, hold on to your thought in response to this, Paul, because I want to show something of Rosie's that gets right to that issue of calling it out when you know it not to be right. And you don't always have these opportunities, but Rosie certainly had one in an interview she did 2 summers ago now with a former member of the Stephen Harper cabinet, Chris Alexander, on an issue about the situation in Syria and how much journalism had been done on the story in Syria and the fleeing of the refugees. Watch this clip.
This has been going on for years. Why did the government not act faster now?
Exactly.
I'm actually interested in why this is the first Power and Politics panel we've ever had on this.
Mr. Alexander, that's completely false, and I can send you links to the previous shows that we've discussed about this. We're discussing it during an election campaign because there's a crisis situation going on in Europe right now. But if you'd like me to send those to you, I can, because you've been on the show previously and discussed it.
I've never been on the show in a panel discussion on these issues.
No, because you weren't allowed to do panels as a minister. That's why you're here now. If you want to avoid the question, let's just be clear that that's what's happening.
I don't want to avoid the question, Rosemary. You want to avoid the fact that the biggest conflict and the biggest humanitarian crisis of our times has been there for 2 years, and you and others have not put it in the headlines where it deserves to be.
So, we did some checking. Since 2011, when the crisis began, Power and Politics has talked about the crisis in Syria 32 times, with some participation or mention of Chris Alexander. 5 times he appeared on this program to talk about refugees, including a one-on-one interview on May 30th, 2014.
Oh, snap.
Oh, yeah. So Rosie had a lot of trouble getting guests after that interview. No, that's being prepared and ready to, to tackle spin that's coming at you on the political front in this particular case. But Paul, if you want to do a quick add-on to that before we move on.
Well, I would just quickly say that the truth it can be a complicated concept, and it's a moving target in a lot of ways. And so what I do a lot in the U.S., away from the White House, is to, you just talk to as many people as you can. One of the clips that was in the intro, Peter, was from West Baltimore after the riots, after the death of Freddie Gray a couple of years ago. And, there was, the immediate thing was covering the riot. And then what's really going on here? And what is at the heart, what is the truth of the racial problem in the States, which is, a complicated question, of course, but to get closer to the truth, to chip away at the truth, is talk to people away from where all the action is. And that was one of the people that we were talking to there, not the guy that we were talking about in London, but talk to as many people as you can and get the various versions of the truth, and somehow, as people think their own truth, you'll just get closer to it. It's hard to arrive right at it, and I just think all you can really do is try, and how you try is by talking to as many people with different voices as you possibly can.
Just to tie a knot on it, one of the political spinners that I used to deal with and try and break through told me once, I'll never lie to you, but don't assume that means I'm telling you the truth. And it's an interesting concept, and it's the way we often try to go after those particular political stories. Okay, Question from the web, just coming in right now from a chap by the name of Bud Cooper, Haliburton, Ontario. He asks, do you ever get emotional when reporting, or are you not allowed to? That's a good question. Adrienne.
Why me? I would say the day you don't get emotional, go home. Because there's something fundamentally wrong with you if you're not feeling in your bones, in your DNA, what's happening. I am the one that cries at the phone commercials. This is me. I am a terrible weeper, and sometimes you get that thing in the field, and you guys have all felt it, where you just, you feel your hair going up on the back of your neck. For me, I felt it a lot in Liberia when we were covering the Ebola crisis, and it's so far away, and it's so hard for people here to imagine what it's like there. And, there's a little girl named Esther, and the first time we encountered her was in a photograph. She had acquired Ebola. She fell gravely ill. When she recovered, she learned that both her parents had died of the disease. We're talking really like a little girl. And comes the day of the big graduation ceremony when everybody goes home because they're cured, and it's an incredible day, and this is supposed to be a miracle. Everybody's smiling, and she's weeping because at the end of the graduation, your family comes and picks you up. And so she was sitting there on a chair by herself with her little bag, and no one was coming for her. Those are days, yeah. But the benefit for us is that we get to write it out. You work with the pictures, and you work with the sound, and you tell the story online, on radio, on television, and it's a bit cleansing, I find.
Let me just ask Nahlah the same one, because she's seen an awful lot in her time reporting on stories, especially overseas, and especially in the last couple of years. How do you handle that?
Well, I mean, it's, as Adrienne says, I think you'd be lying to, so I'd be lying to myself if I said that I didn't get emotional and that it didn't happen on almost every single occasion. And the one for me that comes to mind is actually the rescue ship that I was on this past fall. I'm not sure if many of you saw it, but it was on the 5th Estate, and it was watching these people in the struggle of their life getting rescued in the middle of the Mediterranean. I mean, and the last thing they expect is for a journalist to be standing there with a camera, sticking it into their face, trying to capture this battle of their life. So imagine watching someone fighting for their life. I mean, forget wars, but someone who's trying to get away from something in the middle of the sea, at the mercy of the sea, and at the mercy of some young men and women who are on this rescue ship. It was really hard not to get emotional. I think the key, though, is to be emotional, but to not let it affect what you write, and to be stoic when you're on the air. To me, you can't show that emotion on air. It's just not something that I think any of us do, really. You can feel it. It might inform some of your writing, but I think that's separate from what you put on the air.
Yeah.
I had a funny moment on Checkup this weekend, actually. We were doing our episode on teen suicide and the show 13 Reasons Why. And amazing callers from across the country, parents who were calling in about their kids committing suicide, teenagers talking. At the end of the show, it was heavy stuff, amazing calls. But at the end of the show, we had a young teenager, and she said, "Happy Mother's Day." And this was the last caller, and then the music came up, and I don't know what it was, but it just hit me, and I started to get quite choked up on air, and I wondered about it for a second, and then I said, I just have to let it be, and so I actually said, you're going to make me cry, and I stopped reading for about 15 or 20 seconds, which was very awkward for me, because I'm used to being that stoic host. But I just felt like I had to let that emotion be.
Yeah, I think, as Nahlah said, nobody, and Adrienne too, that nobody tells you can't show emotion. You try to ensure it doesn't get in your emotion, your feelings don't get in the way of trying to tell the story. But don't assume that means nobody gets emotional, or that it means it doesn't impact you, not just then, but for a long time afterwards. Some of the things these people have seen, and even in my limited time on covering stories similar to that overseas, you never forget it. It impacts you as a person. It changes you as a person, what you see. So, we're not without emotion. There's a question here in the audience.
So my question sort of builds on the discussion that's happened so far, in that when it comes to injustice, the things that go against everything that you believe in deeply, the values that you hold most dear, can you think of a time that you really had to check your objectivity and ensure that you were reporting in the fairest, most just way to be representative of the whole story?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. All these are great questions, and we've all been through episodes like this. This whole museum is built on stories about injustice and the people behind them on both sides of the issue. But on your specific question, do you want to try it, Adrienne?
I was just
first?
thinking about it. It's an interesting, you said, if I can understand, you say, can you ever think of a time? And I'm thinking that it's kind of every time. Because in a way, what we do, and this is sort of my mindset of it, is that we're kind of professional strangers and we're professional outsiders. So I am forever feeling like I don't belong anywhere at all, and that I'm always the fly on the wall, and that, in a way, I don't come from anywhere. I know it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, and I hope my mom's not listening, but, I don't have brothers and sisters.
She's always listening.
Always
Your mom.
I don't have brothers and sisters. I don't have kids. I didn't grow up with aunts and uncles. I sort of don't have a sense of a place necessarily, and then I have a job that takes me to different places where I'm always new. And that's a bit of a gift when you're talking about dealing with an injustice or a difficult story, because people are forever saying to you, you don't understand. Nobody understands. And so your job is to say, I know. That's why I'm standing here. Help me. Help me understand so that I can then convey. And when that becomes your tool, is to say, I am new. Please walk me through this. That becomes your quest, and everything else gets parked.
One of the techniques that Adrienne's used often throughout her career to try and get to the nub of a story like this is to try and bring the two sides together and let them talk it out in front of the cameras. And she did this most recently in Washington right after the Trump inauguration, where you saw on the streets over 2 days, two very different sets of people. Watch this clip.
Not surprisingly, the conversation drew some curious stares and a few side debates. And sure, there's still anger.
Kim, do you think I don't work in a man's world?
Well, if you're asking for a leg up,
I have never asked for a leg up.
wait,
You're assuming we're asking for leg up. I've raised a daughter as a single mother
believe in affirmative
who
action?
owns
So
her
do you
own
think that
business.
she should get a leg up because she's a woman?
She's never asked
Should
for a
she?
leg up.
Good time to remember it's cold and there's the baby. Izzy just about having enough of this. We all decided to wrap it up.
I actually really like him. I would actually say that we are probably a strong group of women.
Then an exchange of contact information. That we didn't see coming.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, tell us how that happened.
Well, it's interesting. Outside the office in Washington, there's a hotel. And so it was the morning of the Women's March. We went by the hotel, and there are some people sitting on the curb, having a smoke. And it was the inaugural balls the night before. And they're watching the women's marchers go by. And we're looking at a couple of them going, what are they doing? They didn't understand those women who were walking by. And some of the women walking by were looking at some of these women in their fur coats and thinking, what? So we grabbed a couple of them and said, what's happening here when you guys look at each other? And invariably the answer was, I don't understand them. They don't understand me. I'd be happy to talk to them, but they'll never talk to me. And so at the end of the day, we got their numbers and said, if you're serious, let's have a conversation. And we couldn't agree on where to talk, of all things. That was the problem, where we're going to talk. So I just called time on it and said, we're going to do it right here, because that's where we first met. So they agreed to talk on the street. And the weird thing is they have stayed in touch, those women. I don't know that the conversations are always gentle. No one's going to anybody's house for dinner. But they call each other every now and then when something squirrely happens, every 8 minutes or so.
Another question from here in the audience. Go ahead.
Hey, so as a proud millennial, I know that our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter when digesting news, and we go to other sources. So I'm wondering, in terms of how you present a diversity of opinions, you may have them, but how do you ensure that we get them in a really short soundbite, because we get tired and want to go to something else?
Okay, let me bring in Diane into the conversation to
Thanks.
try
I don't have
her
an answer for
expertise
that.
on this one.
You know, I'm not sure that we can remedy that. I think that we are always struggling with the task, which is to get the information in front of viewers, readers, listeners, because we're all filing across all platforms now, as we call it. And we're trying to get those diversity of opinions and points of view and the facts, and to also shape it in a story, a narrative that makes it, frankly, more interesting to listen to. But to do that at the speed of light comes at the cost of everything that's good about what I just mentioned. So I think we try to balance that and ultimately hope that we've structured the story that we're telling you in such a way that we convince you to give us another 15, 10 seconds of your time and to read it a little bit longer. And it's interesting, there's a story I wrote for CBC News Online last week that I knew was dense, I knew was complicated, was not going to interest everybody. It was about money laundering by a Russian syndicate in Canada. Complicated on a whole bunch of levels. And I was talking to the person who was putting it online, and she said, you know, your retention on this one is 1:45 seconds. That was high five worthy. For someone to spend that long reading a story, you can actually get pretty far in there. And it was comforting to me, too, to think that people are spending more than 10, 15 seconds, because I think we worry that people are just reading a headline, maybe into the first paragraph and gone. And there's some metrics that say that that's true. But I think if the stories are well constructed and we're telling people what they're interested in hearing about, they'll stay with us.
I have a point. Can I?
Yep.
Okay. Just quickly. We do two things on our show. Not that I want you to just look at minutes of the show, but we do use something called Snappy TV. So we snap out on Twitter and social media like a minute or 2 minutes of a best exchange. That's easy. And then this will be very quick. The other thing we do with our show is we turn it into a podcast. So we just throw it up after the show is over and it becomes a podcast, which may sound like not a big deal, except I realized the other day that some people have no idea what I look like or that it is a TV show. There are a lot of millennials who just listen to the podcast, and they I don't know what they think I'm talking about when I say let's look at the tape, but some of them just listen to the podcast. So I do think we're doing things to try and reach out to people because you consume news in all different kinds of ways. So whether we're doing it online or podcasts or whatever, I think we're trying to make sure everybody can access us.
All right. Let me remind millennials of a television news anchor who was sort of set the standard for all who've come since, and that was Walter Cronkite at CBS in the United States. And one of his sayings was, a television newscast, in other words, the stringing together of the 1.5-minute, 2-minute clips, if you wish, of news stories, is and always will be just the headlines. Just the headlines. You take a transcript of the newscast, a half-hour newscast, you probably couldn't fill the front page of most of the great newspapers in the world with that transcript, which gives you a sense of how much information is there. It doesn't account for the fact that pictures have their own value as well. But what it means is if you want real information about those issues that concern you, you've got to go beyond the newscast. You've got to search out whether it's articles on print, but better still for us, is if you look at the longer form journalism. And one of the greatest advocates of longer form journalism is Duncan and what he does. So make the case in a minute or less for the longer form television journalism.
I'm actually heartened by the numbers that we've seen on our online platforms for our long-form journalism, and everybody that you've seen here are some amazing storytellers. At the National, we have the luxury of digging deeper and going longer. And I actually don't buy the argument that millennials have a short attention span. I think what they do have is a strong BS sensor. And when they see good journalism, they're willing to invest 5, 10, 15, half an hour watching it. And so I have seen our numbers and our metrics that Diane talked about. And I don't actually think that the short attention span that we're talking about means necessarily the death of current affairs, as we call it, or long-form journalism. I think there's an appetite for in-depth analysis. That's what's going to keep us in our job in this very changing world of journalism, is our ability to offer that analysis.
All right. I love this question. We could all handle this. Let me start with Paul on it. Michael Hind asks this: who says that a journalist has to reflect all sides of a story? For example, when you're dealing with a scientist versus a non-scientist, why should a journalist give both credence? And I guess the biggest example of that is often is the climate change issue, but you heard the question as asked.
And I'm going to do what any smart person would do, which is punt it to a slightly different subject. Because, to the earlier question, I was going to talk a little bit about guns in the U.S. And after Newtown, I started thinking that because if it had come to me in the cry thing, I cried at Newtown, And one of the stories we did in the days after that was a group of people who it was like, we just can't take it anymore, man. And like they got together in their kitchen and they said, we are going to start to change the rules about guns. It's too much, right? And our whole piece was about this the dawn of this group, which still exists, by the way. They've renamed themselves, but they're still out there. They still haven't, obviously achieved what they set out to do. But the piece didn't have the other side in it. It didn't have, we didn't go to the NRA and say, what's the case for more guns? Even though they made it after Newtown. But we didn't think there was a need to balance that. And we were talking about this the other night, right? And there are sort of truths of a kind, back to the truth question, right? Different people have different views of that. And I think it's okay at times not to. The climate change is another good example. There will be people who will always say, well, you have to have somebody say, well, it's not, who knows, right? Well, smart people know, and smart people have really thought hard, and there is tons of evidence, and that's the story, man, and I think that we ought not be afraid of that, and this whole term of false equivalence and things like that, emails, Hillary Clinton, it comes into play, but at the end of the day, I think you have to curate that kind of stuff and be smart about it. That's how I approach it.
Rosie?
Well, we had an example of this in Ottawa recently with Senator Lynn Bayak. I don't know if you followed that story at all, but she gave a speech in the Senate where she wanted to talk about all the positive things that had happened at residential schools. And it went on, and she claimed that if you read the whole speech, you would understand, and I read the whole speech 15 times and still didn't understand. And so we did interviews every single day until she was pulled off of this committee about Indigenous people. And we talked to a lot of people, and certainly, I don't know everything about the subject, but the Truth and Reconciliation Commission said that residential schools were intended to kill the Indian in the child. That to me seems pretty indisputable. So for a white senator to come forward and say that she knew some Aboriginal people who had had a good experience, that wasn't okay. So we did seek out other parts of that story, and there were people who said, yeah, I learned how to play hockey in residential school, and that was a good thing. But there was nothing wrong, I think, in that instance in saying, that is not the truth that we are comfortable with in this country. And you, in a position of authority and power, should not be repeating something like that. And then we never heard from her again.
Peter, can I just...
Yep.
We used to have these four-core forums back in the day.
That's a foreign correspondent.
Foreign correspondent forum. And Patrick Brown, the amazing woodland creature that is Patrick Brown, this amazing man, used to say, hey, there are lots of sides to stories, but they're not always equal, so you can't always treat them as equal. And it isn't, 38 seconds to the guy who says it is a duck and 38 seconds to the guy who says, no, I don't think that's a duck. It doesn't always work like that. That's a very
and it
weird
ought
construct.
not.
No.
Yes, and it ought not to, exactly.
My favorite Patrick Brown story, very, very short. He was the Nahlah Ayed and the Adrienne Arsenault of his day, one of them, covering big stories around the world. But he also covered the funeral of Elvis Presley.
Did he really?
And he was always upset about those who believed that Elvis was still alive. Because at the funeral, he actually looked in the coffin. And there was Elvis. All right, we have a question here.
Hello, I am Erin. I'm a school psychologist in Winnipeg School Division, and I work with a really high Indigenous population. A question that I have had for a long time is that in the news, Indigenous youth in particular see a certain perspective of Indigenous peoples, and how do you address, increasing the number of Indigenous role models that are in media, or that the stories that are covered in media that show, resilience and passion and pride for culture for Indigenous youth?
I want to ask Duncan to start us off on this, because Duncan did a Facebook Live just this afternoon on Indigenous issues, and got a fair number of questions in a short period of time. But how would you deal with that one?
That's why I got into this business. I didn't see people that looked like the people in my community on television. Jesse on the Beachcombers. That was the only real Indian that I ever saw on TV. And so that's in part, and when you go into isolated First Nation communities or urban Indigenous communities like Winnipeg, the TV's always on. And I didn't see myself, and so that's why I got into this business. And there are more and more of us getting into this business now. And so when I look at the second part of your question was, how do you present positive role models and stories of resilience? I like to think that the creation of CBC Indigenous about 3 years ago now has done a huge service to the network and also to Canada in terms of presenting a more holistic picture, not just the tragedies and the crisis and the us versus them conflict that we have seen over and over and over in media for over a century now. But we're starting to see more holistic pictures, and we're starting to see the lady that opened up the Bannock restaurant in Regina, and we're starting to see the Pee-wee all-girls hockey team from northern Manitoba that won a trophy. Those are important stories to tell so that all Canadians see that life in First Nation communities is not just nasty, brutish, and short. But I will say this one thing also, that those stories about crisis and tragedy are also important to tell. We shouldn't just be leaning over and overcorrecting and just telling positive stories about happy-go-lucky Indians, because there are some really critical issues that this country needs to face, and journalists are there to shine light in dark places. And so we need to go to those communities and often ask stories about financial accountability, for example, about sexual assault, sexual violence. Those stories need to be told as well. The trick is having a holistic picture and having the good and the bad.
I've got a question here that just came in online that's not directly related to the focus of yours, but it is indirectly related to the issue. Nahlah, why don't you try it? Raphael Bendahan asks this question. How do you become sensitive to, excuse me, just a sec. What are you trying to tell me? Okay, I will ignore it. Okay. Here's the question, Raphael Bendahan. We just had some crosstalk going on there. How do you become sensitive to minorities who have less privilege and educational opportunities than most of the people who are reporting on them?
That's a really, really good question, and it's certainly one that we've as you know, we've grappled with at the CBC, and we've talked about quite a bit. And there are two ways I would think about this: is one through the reporting, but also one through who's reporting. So on the second level, I think the CBC, I mean, for example, I'm involved in a mentorship program at the CBC where we try to encourage people of all backgrounds, but certainly those of underrepresented communities in Canada to become stronger voices, to do more at the CBC. So a number of people at the CBC of all kinds of backgrounds are mentoring younger journalists to try to get those voices, to make them stronger and to build their confidence and make them a bigger part of the CBC. So there's that. Then there's the reporting part of it. And it goes back to what voices do you include in a story? Well, I mean, what we were talking about earlier about balance, I mean, in the international context, and I think it works here as well, the idea is to get to that person who doesn't normally get their voice on. To me, the ones who are fighting, the ones who are politicians, all those guys get lots of airtime. It's always the little guy. It's always the person who doesn't get to the table, who doesn't get to the microphone, doesn't know how to get to the microphone, are the people that I want to hear from. So you go all the way to the back end of the room, and you find that quiet person who doesn't rush up to the stage, and you say, what do you think? And so that's, as a reporter, that I think is part of my job.
I want to show you another clip. This is from one of Paul's items. And it addresses this issue of trying to find the people we don't normally talk to who are becoming, part of the bigger story that we're trying to tell, and we haven't got to them. We haven't talked to them to try and understand something that's happening. This happened in the U.S. election campaign last year, where Paul went hunting a particular group of Trump supporters. Watch this.
The head of the pack makes it through the light. The pack makes it through the light. Don't get split up.
Stop. Keep it going.
Back at Kool-Aid's bike shop, it's the day before the South Carolina primary. And they're getting set for that ride. These bikers are as authentic as it comes. Engaged voters who represent a new political force in America, one that old-school politicians can ignore at their peril. They ride for a candidate who speaks to an America that believes it has gone unheard until now.
Yeah! Woo!
Oh, yeah!
Gathering eventually at the local Trump headquarters, hoping for another glimpse of their guy. And as ever,
Thank you, Donald!
Trump, when he arrives for meetings, does not disappoint.
Thank you. You got to vote tomorrow, everybody.
Right on. You're in. You're in.
Make America great again.
Amen. Trump.
The bikers, man.
Amen.
Leaving the bikers, already impressed, pumped, and ready for more.
Build that wall! That wall! Build that wall! Build that wall!
Something tells me he probably wishes he could go back to that day after the days he's had recently. But tell us about the decision to go after the bikers for Trump.
We were sort of scared out of our pants that day, man. We thought we were going to get beat up. But they were the nicest people, right? But that story began with the same kind of thinking that Nahlah was talking about, which is, on one level, TV news ain't rocket science. You could walk on a Capitol Hill or Parliament Hill or downtown Toronto and just aim the camera at people and who are in power and who have money and who have access to getting their voice out. That's easy, and it's a lot harder, and I argue, and I think we're all on the same page here, much more valuable to go and talk to other people. And so at the time, that was obviously during the campaign, we thought, well, who are these people that are voting for Trump, and why are they? And we thought we'd get, kind of frothing at the mouth crazy people, because that was what the brand was at the time, and we saw a lot of that at rallies. But man, they were thoughtful, and I'm sorry that there wasn't a clip in there because they had reasoned cases to make about what they liked about this guy. And this is all separate, by the way, from how things have worked out in the White House now. But at the time, it was interesting, right? Because this is a great crowd of Americans. Those guys told us they had never voted before, but something was making them want to vote now because the lesson was they were so fed up with politics of the last multiple generations that had done nothing for them. And so what do we take away from this now? Well, they're still there. 60 million people plus voted for Trump, right? Because they're fed up with the status quo. And even though the White House is on fire, they're still there. And the things we learned from them are still legitimate. And we learned that because we sought them out. Because instead of just going onto Capitol Hill and interviewing guys in suits, we went out to find the bikers for Trump, and man, were they interesting. And, I came away from that still thinking, but he won't win. There's not enough of them. But all these people who never voted before said, I think it's time. And he threaded the needle, and we saw what happened on election night, so it was instructive. But those are voices that we don't normally hear and that we ought to hear more of all the time, no matter your political stripe, I think.
All right, question in the audience?
Yes, good evening. I was wondering about how social media is impacting you. I follow a lot of you on Twitter, and many of you are very active on Twitter, but you're getting a lot of immediate feedback, and I try to read through some of the comments, and there's wide sways both ways. How does that impact your stories and how you guys operate? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a good question, a question of our times, and some of us sort of dip in and out of Twitter because it gets kind of hot at times. But let's try a couple. Diana, why don't you start, and then Rosie, who's Miss Twitter.
I'm a fan of Twitter. My family certainly thinks I'm too much on the phone. But I find it a very useful tool because it's a way for me to immediately engage with people who are consuming the news and hear what they think about it. What are we missing? What are we spending too much time on? What are we doing wrong in people's views? So it's a very immediate, quick way to hear from people, more than I've ever experienced in my time as a journalist, because prior to that, someone could maybe leave you a voicemail or write you a letter, but people talk themselves out of that all the time. They have that motion of really feeling strongly about something and think, I'm going to write, and then the next day they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. But with Twitter and other forms of social media, they can get to you right away. To that end, I find it incredibly useful and informative. I get tips, I get a sense of who's interested, who I might even want to talk to in subsequent stories, because investigative journalism is often you stay on one story for a while. So for me, it's a very useful tool. When it comes to the really polarized opinions, the trolls, I don't engage with them. I'm not going to engage when someone who's going to, start yelling at me in a shopping mall either. If you want to have a reasonable discussion, even if you want to tell me you don't like something I've done, I'm cool with that. But the really personal, hateful, just trying to goad me into something is just not worth my time as I see it. And I don't think it's really useful. People aren't, in that case, really looking for a debate. They're looking for a chance to try to shame you, call you out, do something to try to get you exercised or upset. And I think it's important to try to figure out where the line is for you when you engage. So, for me, social media has been a fairly positive experience, which isn't to say that I haven't experienced some of the roughest stuff out there. I just really don't play in that sandbox.
That was actually me in the shopping mall.
Was that you?
An aisle over. I want to know if you needed any help.
The glasses and the hair, that doesn't fool anybody, right?
Rosie?
I had a guy yell at me at the meat counter at Loblaws one day. It was very strange. Anyway, I get yelled at a lot on Twitter, which I actually don't have a problem with, and I love Twitter. I'm sure if you follow me on Twitter, you know that. And obviously, politics, people are very passionate about. They've got lots of strong opinions, so I'm happy to take all of those. What I don't take on Twitter is personal attacks, and I don't even mean why did you say that? I mean, you're so stupid, or I don't like the way you look, or whatever. I deal with it a little differently. I often retweet the person and say, wow, your mama must be really proud. And then my Twitter followers go after that person. So my bosses don't love that approach, but I often do that. But generally, Twitter for me is a huge tool. And it's actually a huge tool to follow off what Paul said. Because I'm in Ottawa and there's sometimes this little bubble over Parliament Hill and I only talk to guys in suits, I use Twitter as a way to sort of connect with other Canadians and regular Canadians who just want to know things or have things to say. So for me, it often fills in holes in terms of what you're all thinking about an issue. And that's really important for me because it's hard for me sometimes to reach out and get outside of my studio and the construct of politics. So I find that really helpful when you tweet me things and ideas and thoughts, because then I sort of know where you're coming from. So I love it, even when I get yelled at.
Nahlah.
I'm an addict as well, and I used to work for a wire service, the Canadian Press, and so it really fulfills this need of mine to kind of have output all the time, so Twitter really suits my personality. But the one thing that I found it really useful for is actually the subject of this panel, which is the diversity of opinion, because it amplifies, as you all know, I mean, it's the smallest communities with opinions about certain things, it amplifies their voice. So when I write something that might be controversial, not only do I hear from the usual suspects, but I'm also hearing from that little guy I mentioned at the back of the room who says, you know what, my voice is just as equal, and I can also tweet at you and say, why did you forget about my point of view? So that to me is a really important point on social media. The other one is how it's changed the way we work, in that we are constantly outputting. There's always a tweet to send. There's always an Instagram to put out. There's always a Facebook Live. In fact, there wasn't the other day because we couldn't get to it during the French election. But there's extra stuff for us now to do. So it actually, in terms of the mechanics of how we work, it really has expanded the number of platforms we have to deliver to.
A couple of questions that have come in on social media. Dale Michael Carlson asks, should journalists state what political ideologies they support? And you could expand this. Should journalists have to declare what, if they have any, what shares they hold, what's their, stock portfolio? How far do you go in declaring what your, personal feelings or perhaps your personal holdings are, so an audience understands where you're coming from in telling a story? This is one, we all debate a lot over many years in the business, and I wonder what feelings some of you might have. Duncan?
I don't tell anybody who I vote for, or if I vote at all. So I wouldn't feel any inclination to share it with my news audience. As far as as far as investments and things like that, I mean, that's what our JSP is about. I mean, we have journalistic standards of our own about declaring our own biases or conflicts. If we have a conflict with a story, then it's up to us to be responsible and declare that. So yeah, if I'm reporting on a copper mine that I happen to hold shares in, then I would feel responsible to let the audience know that anyway.
Anybody else want to?
I was just going to say, I mean, a colleague of ours, a friend of ours from a long time ago, Don Newman, took the position that journalists shouldn't vote. And he felt very strongly about that. And I certainly understood the position. I understood what he was trying to get at. And he felt, in particular, because of his role in Ottawa, that he felt that was a kind of a space he needed to create for himself. I think it's interesting as a journalist, I struggled with that earlier in my career. Was it okay to vote? Was I kind of, was it a form of unconscious bias to choose a candidate or a party? And I find as I've gotten older and more cynical maybe, that while I'm comfortable voting, I'm also very comfortable critiquing. And I still think that I can bring that kind of journalistic rigor or critique to a party or a policy as a journalist while having an opinion about what I think might be best in my writing. But I think it's a really interesting conversation for journalists to have about where the comfort zone is.
Well, for me, it's sort of a question of obligation. I feel that as a citizen of Canada that I must vote. That it's just something you've got to do. But I'm also eligible to vote in the UK because I'm a resident there. But I don't vote there because I'm covering the stories there. That's my line. That's my decision. I do not exercise that right there because I am covering the elections that are going to happen very shortly.
So if you were in Canada covering the elections, you wouldn't vote?
It's a good question. I'll get back to you on that when I go to Ottawa.
We have a question in the audience, and it's over here.
Hello, I'm over here. Hi, my name's Levi. I'm a student journalist. I'm on my way to Carleton Journalism next year. So this year I was covering a story about a student politician who had made transphobic comments, and I'm finding sources for that. Some of my sources made some ridiculous statements, and in the end I decided to not include them. So my question is to you guys, and maybe Rosemary as well. What is your opinion on sort of shutting someone or a source out of a story if their opinions are outrageous?
Who wants that one?
You do it, because there's lots of outrageous stuff.
Sorry, before you go, leave the microphone. I'm not sure that I understand the question. What was the
So your opinion on either including or excluding a source or someone from a story if their opinions are outrageous?
outrageous in what way?
Like in the sense of them saying something ridiculous, like something extremely transphobic or something racist, something, I know in America you must have to deal with some of that stuff a lot. But
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question.
But there's the terminology is, you know, a source. What do you mean by a source? You mean just somebody you've interviewed?
Yeah, someone who's close to the story.
Not sending a source, like it's not
someone
an
who's
anonymous
close to the
source,
story,
it's an
someone
actual okay.
integral.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if it was, let's talk about race then for a second, and if it was somebody expressing a racist viewpoint, I mean, the human being in me wants to toss that out the window. If it's to demonstrate that racism exists, I don't know. It would depend on what was said and the greater context. I'm not trying to dodge this, but that's it's a judgment call at the time, and I guess it would be on the merits of the greater of what the story is. It's a hard one to answer in a way because I guess you know it when you see it or hear it, and if I don't want to give my sense is to not give a platform to outrageous, ridiculous, hateful, hurtful commentary, I guess, unless you're trying to demonstrate, man, look what is here in the streets of Chicago or Baltimore or wherever, and this or you know Missouri, as we've seen with Black lives in the last couple of years, to demonstrate that there's value. People were offended by the build that wall. People still are offended by that. That's outrageous in its own way when it becomes a crowd chant, right? And yet there's value in putting that out there to show what is going on in America. So it's a judgment call, is the short answer, and I don't know if that answers the question.
Can I leap in for a second?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think what's interesting, I think sort of the funny looks, I don't know, there'd you go. The funny looks on our faces when you ask that is because I think it's sort of culturally for us, we do a lot of talking up here, but our job is actually to listen. And I think we spend most of our days listening to some pretty wild stuff from a whole range of places. And that's really what we're there to do, is to give people a full hearing. I mean, we talked about the Philippines a little bit, and I just got back from there. Part of what I was doing was covering the drug war. And I was at a wake for a woman who had been sitting by the side of the road eating watermelon when masked gunmen came up and shot her through the heart. We have no indication of what she was doing or how this was wrapped up in the drug war, but the feeling of some of the people who were at the wake, who were like serving food at the wake, was, well, you know, Duterte's drug war, you know, I actually feel better about it. I feel safer because of it. This is someone who is like 4 feet away from the body of this young woman. And on the face of it, you can think, are you kidding me? But I don't live her life, you know, and it's my job just to be there and listen to her and try to not react to those comments, but try to put them in some perspective. I mean, I think if someone is going to speak hate to your face and in your microphone, I will confess I have walked away in the middle of some interviews. I've done it, rightly or wrongly. You know, I was covering a story in London, and I wish I could remember the point of the story, but there was a man who started telling me about how gay people should probably be eliminated because they were, you know, intolerable and unacceptable, and I just took his microphone off and walked. I said, okay, I'm done.
And I think, you know, and the flip side of that, not to, you know, take this on too long, but the flip side of that is that we are not just vessels for information as journalists. We do bear responsibility for what we broadcast, what we publish, and the way we tell a story. So if someone is saying something inflammatory, it doesn't mean that you dismiss it, but it means you have to have a really good reason for including it, because you wear that too. You will always wear the decision to have included it. So it's about making decisions that you can live with in terms of what you put in the stories, because they don't disappear. I mean, the best expression I heard lately was, the story doesn't end when you publish or broadcast your story. For the viewer, that's when it begins. And actually, as a journalist, your connection to that story lives for a long time, more now than ever because of online. But it means that you're really tested to make the best decisions about all of the material you have, including inflammatory things that people say.
I know he wants to move on, but there is a debate in the Senate right now about a transsexual bill, and not all senators understand what trans rights are about, and a lot of them have said, you know, what you would probably view as ignorant things. To me, that's actually helpful, right? Because if you show people all the sides of that story, that actually shows the distance that you have to go to explain an issue. And those people represent lots of different voices. So, you know, I wouldn't say to you, give that person 30 minutes on your radio station. But if you can, as Paul says, put it in the context of why they're saying that, what it means, and what the debate is about, that actually can be very useful to you as a journalist and very useful to the public as well.
All right. We've had a number of questions that have come in online about something that's happened inside the CBC in the last few days, and many of them are focused around what Troy Andrew Sebastian asks. Is anyone on the panel going to address the stepping away of the National's managing editor? Let me address that briefly, and then we'll go on with questions, some of which may have something to do with this. But the managing editor of the National, who was appointed about a month ago, made some clearly inappropriate and hurtful remarks on Twitter late last week about the issue of cultural appropriation. And the CBC, in its wisdom, has decided, after investigating this and talking to the person in question and also to a lot of the people internally who were hurt by this and externally who were hurt by the remarks that were made, has decided to reassign that person within the CBC management system. So that's taking place, and he is also taking a variety of different courses himself at his own instigation on cultural awareness and meeting with a number of First Nations groups on this. But that all happened just within the last couple of hours. So he has been reassigned and will be in a different role in the months ahead. But let me just make the point here on this particular angle of the story. That's not my decision. It's not our decision. That is a decision made by CBC management. We're CBC journalists, and we're confronted with dealing with issues like this all the time in terms of stories and the decisions we make about how we go about getting information to tell the stories we tell, including stories about the Indigenous community. But the bottom line on this particular case that's risen is a decision on the part of CBC management, not on the part of CBC journalists. We've all expressed our opinions on what happened internally, as we should, and beyond that, it's a decision that the management of the CBC makes. I think we actually have a question about cultural appropriation, and it's in the audience right here.
Hi, my name is Bill.
Right.
Over here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question with regards to how do you address cultural appropriation in the process of preparing a story? There is a clip on CBC a few days back where Jesse Wente was trying to discuss that. Could you share and elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I saw Jesse's was actually debating the issue. Or maybe it was the morning one, which I didn't see, unfortunately, because I was in the air. But this issue of how many people in this room, raise your hand if you're aware of what we're actually talking about in terms of cultural appropriateness. Okay, the vast majority do. So the question is, how do we address it as we're doing our stories? Duncan has helped us on this as he's helping us deal with this issue. How would you start us off on it?
So To go to your question about cultural appropriation, there's a possibility that I may do this topic on Checkup on the weekend, on Sunday. And I take our responsibility to not comment on issues in the news quite seriously. And so I have always had the practice of not commenting on issues of the news. But I want to frame it to you in something that I do feel comfortable commenting on, which is journalism, and something that I've shared with my students. I teach at the UBC Graduate School of Journalism a course called Reporting in Indigenous Communities. And one of the things that I talk to them about is when they are going to report in Indigenous communities, they have to recognize that there is a long history of people coming into the community, whether it's missionaries, whether it's anthropologists, whether it's art dealers, whether, just the list goes on, bone stealers, you name it, coming into the community saying, I want to tell your story, or I want to share your fabulous art, or whatever, and taking it away. That's been the experience for First Nation communities for a very long time in Canada. And so in the context of my journalism class, what I do with my students is say, we go into communities and we say, we want to tell your story. I'm a news reporter, I'm a storyteller, I want to tell your story. And I share with my students that in fact, it is absolutely fair for a First Nation community to not observe us as storytellers, but as story takers. We go in and stick a microphone in their face, ask for a clip, they cry or they laugh or whatever, we take it away, we edit it and put it on the news, and then we go on to the next story. And so I think that the responsibility for journalists is not to be very cognizant of that unfortunate burden that we all journalists in Canada carry of that historical distrust that now exists between journalists and Indigenous communities, and to be very cognizant that we may be being perceived as story takers, and that we need to be far more transparent when we're dealing with Indigenous communities about our purposes and how we're going to package the material, how we're going to tell the story. We need to be far more understanding of the cultural protocols of that community. We need to act with respect, and not just with the newsroom, the culture of our newsroom, but to understand the communities that we're operating in. And then we have to be accountable to them afterwards. So when we present their story, and it creates a problem because our prime, one of our very essential principles of journalism is editorial independence. And so no, I will not share the final draft of my script with a subject. I'm very clear about that. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then I'm sorry. Then we're not going to have an interview then. But once my story has gone to air, I'm very clear that I'm going to be accountable to you. And I will phone you up afterwards and say, what did you think? And I'll come back to your community and say, ask me questions. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? How can I do it better the next time? So all of those things, this balance between storytelling and story taking, I think is very, very critical when it comes to Indigenous people because of this long history.
We have another question in the audience. Where is it here? Right here?
Do I start? Oh, man.
Okay.
Yes, I do have a question, and it's something that my husband and I talk about when we're reading about the latest buzzwords, fake news. How has it had any impact on how you have personally felt about your credibility as being an investigative reporter? And secondly, has it changed the way you might report or present yourself in a situation?
Good question, and certainly topical. You should know that most of us have been called far worse things than purveyors of fake news. I'll just say one thing before I ask Diana, who has done a lot of work on this story through her program, The Investigators. But the attack on the media, mainly south of the border, but not exclusively south of the border, has had a very strange impact. A year ago, journalism in many areas was in trouble, especially in print journalism. Since the attack started on fake news and don't trust what you read in the media, some of the best journalism, political journalism, that's been done in decades has occurred. And it's occurred at the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and others, and most of them have seen their circulation rebound after plummeting for a few years. So some may see it as fake news, some may see it as worthwhile news. But the issue is broader than just, what Donald Trump says. The whole question about how people feel about the media and whether they're getting what was our very first question, the truth, when they read it or see it or listen to it. Diana.
Well, I certainly, I think you're right about the resurgence of print. I mean, I was saying to some of the people on the panel earlier today that I can't stop reading the New York Times and Washington Post right now. And the competition between them to cover, what we loosely refer to as the Trump story is unlike anything, certainly in my time as a journalist. So I think there's been kind of a renaissance of that level of investigative reporting. It is true that when I do an investigative story, and investigative stories tend to be a little bit different in that they do tend to lead you toward a conclusion. And I still have to satisfy all of the journalistic standards and expectations of any kind of journalism, but investigative is kind of held separately to say it is reasonable, if you're doing an investigation, that you arrive at a conclusion that you are now sharing with the audience. Whether the audience shares the conclusion with you or not is their choice to make. But it often means that when I do a story, I can count on two responses. I love the story, didn't know that, wow, and this is fake news. And for some reason, whenever people want to respond to you that it's fake news, they do it in all caps. I don't know what the correlation is, but nobody ever writes fake news in small case. What I think is interesting is that we have to double down as journalists on the things that we already did, but we need to do it in a much more aggressive way, which is prove our journalism. Show you how we got to a conclusion, for instance. Not get there too quickly in our storytelling in an effort to tell it quickly, but to take the time to say, here's the work we did. We demonstrate this, we show you that. And on the program, the investigators, Adrienne's been on there, and I know Nahlah's been on there, and often what I'm doing when I'm talking to
Duncan and Rosie have.
Yeah, I know. Your email
got
is next, Peter. But part of what we've been doing is saying, walk us through the story. Walk us through what you did, how you got the interviews, what we didn't see. Let's really show people what we do when they're not just seeing us on television. I think that is part of the proof of performance of what we do. And one of the ways in which we can combat this notion that we're making it up or that we have some agenda. We don't. Our agenda is truth. Our agenda is believing in journalism and believing what it does for society, which is to give people information to then do with it what they see fit. But I think journalism has never been more important now. And I'm excited to be a part of the role that it's playing. I understand that we are challenged to make sure that people believe us, believe in us, and I think it's simply our job to live up to that.
All right, Adrienne, quickly.
I was just going to say, I just want to add to the lexicon of insults as opposed to fake news.
I know your favorite.
Yeah, the recent one I've been getting is prostitute, which is just a fabulous word as far as I'm concerned.
Is it in caps?
Yeah, always in caps, yes, you're right. I kind of think this is a gift to us. This is a strange gift, but it is a gift. It's made data very cool. It's allowed us to slow down a little bit and not just explain or offer a clip of someone, but why did we go to this person? Why are we talking to this person and not that person? It has made this business so exciting at the moment because it's forcing people. It's knocking a complacency out of the industry, I think, which is that there is buy-in and belief, and it is reminding people that we have to be there for our, the viewers and listeners and readers truthfully on all the little things, so that when the big things happen, you can trust us. And I don't think that kind of reminder ever hurts.
And if I can just jump in, I know you got to go, but just because I feel strongly about this living in the land of fake news and coming face to face with that kind of allegation every day. I mean, look, it sounds so corny, but I believe that truth has a way of lighting up the room. And I think I say to journalists, do your job And that's what is going to defeat the allegations of fake news. And look, give Donald Trump credit, right? He's very good at having used that phrase to his advantage, right? It's very sexy to want to believe that if you're out there and you want to believe everything else he says, so therefore discount everything that journalists say. But truth has a funny way of just fighting through that, and the more we do our job, and I agree, it's a blessing, right? This is an amazing time to be a journalist because this matters. And the muddier people make information, the more, I believe, the more people seek clarity. And those who provide it, I think, will rise to the top, or I hope so. Anyway.
Okay, we've only got 15 minutes left. We've got a lot of questions to get through. Linda Pushor asks, I've noticed that mainstream media seem to go to the same experts time after time. How do you ensure that you have a diversified pool of experts who express their thoughts, opinions, and knowledge? Good question. I know Rosie thinks about this and deals with this in a number of ways.
She's tweeting. No.
She's tweeting.
Look at her. She's
Tweeting at the
I
moment.
was Instagramming. No, I agree. It's a huge problem, and it's something that me and my team on the show are very, very aware of. And here's the thing. It's really easy to put the same person on all the time. Oh, something bad has happened. Let's go talk to this person. Oh, we have to talk about the economy. Let's go talk to this person. And my team sometimes hates me because they'll pitch someone that we know is good TV, has lots of things to say, and I say, no, we just heard from them. Like, I just saw them 15 times somewhere else. So we actually strive to, first of all, get more women on, women in unexpected places, talking about defense, national security, finance, places where you don't always hear enough women, but they're out there, you just have to find them. We also try and get diverse voices on, just people who look different, who come from different places, to talk about different issues. It makes my team's job way harder because they have to chase those guests day of. But it makes the show way better because then you get different kinds of viewpoints. And just to circle back to that Indigenous point too, because that's something we're also very aware of on the program, making sure that we are talking enough about Indigenous issues, given that there is a government who says that they're committed to reconciliation. So one of the things I've actually asked my team to do is find good people, find good stories about Indigenous issues. Let's not always talk about communities that have no water or people that are, suicides in Indigenous communities. We had a guy on the other day, Dr. Alika Lafontaine. He's an anesthesiologist who works in northern Alberta. He's amazing. He has a million solutions for how to fix healthcare in Indigenous communities. Fantastic. We had a woman on last week. She was almost 80 years old, Janice Longboat. She won the Order of Canada. I didn't know her at all. She has committed her life to helping survivors of residential schools and women going through the missing and murdered Indigenous inquiry. So not only do I want to hear different kinds of viewpoints, but I also want to hear viewpoints from people who maybe don't get to talk about the good things in their communities enough. Those are the people I also strive to hear from.
All right. We can go to the audience. Where are we? Back there. Sorry, you're hiding behind the camera. Go ahead.
Hi. My question is, how does knowing more than one language help you get to the bottom of the truth? I know that Rosemary is a graduate from Université de Saint-Boniface here in Winnipeg, but maybe others of you speak French as well or other languages. How does language help you get to the bottom of truth?
Nahlah, do you lead the way here and speak? You speak more than 2 languages, right? How many do you speak?
3.
3.
2.5.
That's
really.
more than 2.
Yeah.
So how does it help?
It's. I'll preface my comments by saying that I don't think every journalist needs to speak more than one language. It is preferable in my world that they do, especially if they work internationally. In my world, when I worked in the Middle East, it was essential. And not just to get to know my way around or to access the average person and to speak sort of in everyday speak, but you do hear things on the margins of interviews. You do hear things just in being in someone's house or in speaking to women who don't speak English in a household in the smallest reaches of Lebanon. So yes, you do get closer to the truth in that you are getting exposed to opinions that you may not hear if you don't speak the language. I'm not perfectly fluent in French, but I just spent a month working in France covering the French election, and I have to say again that knowing a bit of French actually did give me better insight into how people felt. We went to a very small town just south of Paris, where we met a farmer, the kind of person I probably would never meet if we weren't doing the story, going back to diversity of opinion. And this man could only speak in French. And we had a very good conversation in which he told me about his very nuanced position as to why he voted for Marine Le Pen. He was tired of the situation, tired of politicians. I think if I had heard that through a translator, that I wouldn't have quite gotten the nuance. He was saying that he was tired, didn't agree with every idea that she had, but that he'd had enough of traditional politics. And he said it in a way that only a French speaker could understand. So I think it's a huge plus, absolutely.
I want to ask you to weigh in on this as well. How many different Indigenous languages do you speak?
I don't speak that. This is one of the sadnesses. I wish I could answer that question and say I spoke Ojibwe and that made a huge difference to my coverage. I don't. It's one of the great holes in my heart. It's one of the great sadnesses that I don't speak my mother tongue. I'm now starting to take Ojibwe courses at the Native Canadian Centre in Toronto at 46 years old. I probably am not going to become fluent, but I wish I could say. I will say that I also make the effort, though, when I'm in Indigenous communities, to ask people if they will share do an interview in the Indigenous language that we're in, which can be quite awkward because obviously, I mean, there are at least 30 major Indigenous language groupings in this country, and far more specific when you get into dialects, it breaks down even more. And of course, I don't speak any of them, so it means that they're speaking to me in their language, and I don't understand a word, and that then I have to then find an Indigenous language speaker in that community, play them the tape, get them to translate it. It's quite a tortuous process, but given the sadness that we have lost so much with regard to Indigenous language in this country, I do try to make the effort to allow Indigenous language speakers to speak in their own language and put it on the national.
Question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Chucky Bismarco. With the relationship we have with America, the U.S., who is our closest neighbor, trade and everything, and especially the fact that they say there are some places where they say that Canada is a copycat. Most things that we do here is borrowed from America, the U.S. There is a concern that there could rise a Donald Trump in Canada. If it truly does happen, how would you handle the situation?
Okay, there's a lot of different angles to that question. And it starts with the assumption that we are copycats, which I'm not sure a lot of people would agree with. I mean, obviously there are certain similarities between Canada and the United States because of our proximity, but we do cut our own path on a lot of different issues, and politics, is one of them. But could a Donald Trump rise in Canada? Well, somebody tried, but he dropped out of the race. But Rosie, what do you make of that? I mean, you cover politics in this country closer than any of the rest of us here.
Well, there's someone else in that Conservative race who's also trying to play on some of the Donald Trump rhetoric. We'll see how that turns out for her next weekend. I think there are some fundamental differences, as Peter pointed out. We are not as polarized politically as the United States. I'm sure Paul would attest to that. He worked for a long time in Ottawa. We are just not. We are not divided politically in that way. We tend to be sort of more center of the road, even if we lean left, lean right. So that's the first thing. But if it were to happen, because you should never say never, because I'm sure everybody down in the U.S. said never, and here we are. One of the things that I concluded watching that, and this sort of goes back to some of the stuff Paul was saying, two things. First of all, you can't just give someone free rein to say whatever they want, which did happen a lot during that election. And in the primaries, Donald Trump got a lot of coverage that he probably didn't deserve. So that, you have to immediately, as someone is a candidate, start holding them accountable. And then I think that the bigger thing in the interim for us, the lesson that I took from that election was to do exactly what Paul did throughout the election. Go and find the people who we are not talking to enough, who may find themselves pulled towards someone who is anti-establishment and trying to give them voice. Because if we go and find those people and give them a voice and let them know that they're being heard, maybe they won't feel like they need to be attracted to a particular political figure who's trying to do the same thing. And I think Paul did a lot of that work here during the election. The problem is I don't know that his American colleagues did it as well.
I would just add a couple things too. That, I mean, I could go on for the rest of our time on how different Americans are than Canadians that I didn't realize until I lived there. It is, we think of ourselves as being basically very similar people, and we're not in many fantastic, like for good and for bad. It's a remarkably different place that I didn't understand until I lived there. The rise of Trump, he was like the right guy at the right time in a country that really wanted to believe his promises. And it's been a while since I covered Canadian politics, but it was never my sense here that there was this giant swath of people that was yearning for a Donald Trump like there was, as was evidenced in the election down there. He also got very lucky, right? He should not have won. I mean, we all know about the popular vote, and he threaded the needle, and whatever the magic was that led him through Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan at the very end. We may never know what knowledge he had of that, but he got lucky. But nonetheless, you know, there were a lot of people, the Bikers for Trump and beyond, 60 million odd, who voted for him, who were dissatisfied with the status quo. And I think we ought not forget that not everyone is happy with the government, and not everyone is happy with the leaders that the parties have put forward. And maybe there's somebody out there that just happens to hit the right. And maybe it's ugly to a lot of other people, but for a lot of people, it's someone who's saying, I like that. And so be aware of that. And in the reporting that we do, report that. Get out there and talk to people and have those voices out. And that's what democracy is. And then we can make a choice, an informed one. I think that's what we try to lead us toward.
All right. I've got time for two questions, both coming in from online. One I'll handle myself, and the other I'll ask each of our panelists to give their answer to. The one I'll try to ask is Mark Street, Mark ST. Do you journalists care when your audience finds you biased or one-sided? Well, you know, of course we care. We care about our work, and we are prepared to defend our work. And if somebody feels that we've been one-sided or unfair or biased, then they should make their case specifically to us. We'll often get that kind of a comment, but with no example of what you're actually talking about. It's hard to respond to that without the example. But if the examples are there and we can't respond to it, or we can't make the argument as to why we don't agree with that, then we got to learn from it. And we do. So, I think that's the way I'd respond to that. But here's the one to everybody. I like this one. These are kind of fun ones. Jacques Laverne from Winnipeg asks, do you each have a bucket list type person that you'd like to interview? So, who would you like to interview, either by name or he says a bucket list type of person, but I think I'd like to hear a name. Diana?
Peter Mansbridge, of course. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, right.
I think right now, that's a moving target for everybody, I think, right? I mean, you ask me a year from now, I probably have a different name.
I'm just asking you tonight.
Right now, I'd love to sit down with Barack Obama.
Okay, good.
Get a little
Duncan?
truth.
So I knew that the National really had no interest in a story on Shania Twain, but I did. I really
How many
like
stories we've done on Shania Twain?
so exactly. But I phoned and tried to get in to do an interview with Shania Twain, even though I knew the National had absolutely no, and I didn't even get close. I didn't even get close. So Shania, if you're listening.
Adrienne.
God, I don't know, but I think I would kind of like to sit down with Jimmy Carter, you know?
Again?
I tried really hard. Like 2 years ago, I even went and sat through his Sunday school, and I followed him up the road, and he made a break for the hardware store. I thought that was my in, the Secret Service behind him, you know.
And he's what, he's 90?
Yeah, I couldn't catch him. But you know, he's sitting on so much opinion, and he's done so much after his presidency, and I just want to sit down with him and go, so, you know, what do you think?
You should
Okay.
be able to catch him.
I know, I got to work
I
out.
mean, the list is so long, I'd bore you all with it, but I'll side on Stephen Hawking because of the discussion about truth and the importance of science and knowledge and all those questions that we're asking ourselves right now. I just think it'd be interesting to hear what he thinks about all of this.
Paul.
We're trying to get him, by the way.
Yeah? Good. Good luck on that.
The former director of the FBI.
Oh.
I'm not holding my breath, though. So he's
Yeah.
got a story to tell, and he will.
Yeah, he will. He seems to be telling it in the last couple of days through
Dribs and
different
drabs.
methods.
It's coming out. I mean, it's like all the way back to, he's got a story to tell. I mean, maybe now next week, so.
You never know. Well, he may be appearing before a committee next week. Rosie?
Well, I'll say Donald Trump because no one else did, but I don't know. I don't even
Hey,
know how I could
you
manage
haven't got
it.
to me yet.
Oh, right. I don't know how I would manage him because I don't know how anybody manages him. Nobody does, I guess. Failing that, I would say Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
She'd have some stuff to say.
Yeah. Lester Holt did a not bad job with Trump after some really,
He did.
really bad interviews
Yeah,
with
he
Trump in the last year or two. We've been trying to get Trump from almost 2 years now, since he became, and we can't get any response from, we can't even get a response from his team to the idea of an interview.
I think a woman interviewer, though, with Trump would be interesting.
Yeah, well,
It'd be different.
Megan Kelly
Be a
had
little
an
different.
interesting
Yeah.
session with him. Okay, well, so you took mine
Sorry.
away from me, but that's okay. That's why I go last. The one favorite person that I've always wanted to interview, which would be impossible to because he's been dead for almost 50 years, or more than 50 years, would be Churchill, because he saw it all through a good chunk of that century. And not only did he watch the history that passed him by, but also through all the different circumstances he witnessed, many of which we've seen in different forms, repeated through time, and how he dealt with them, how he dealt with the mistakes he made, because he made some awful ones, and how he handled the victories, of which he will always be remembered for. So I've always thought that would be a fascinating interview. But we're all lucky, as Nahlah said, we can all think of many. I'm sure she'd like a run at Bashar al-Assad in Damascus, and has been trying for years to get that. But we've all been lucky because we're in a great job that allows us a degree of freedom of access to get to stories that are sometimes painful to watch, sometimes joyful to watch, all of which are stories that hopefully better inform our world about the kind of world that we all live in. So we've been lucky on that. We are tested constantly by our colleagues through the vetting process that we all go through on the stories we tell, and by our audience through nights like this. This national conversation series has been good for us. We've heard some great questions in different cities and different regions about different topics, and all of them underline the diverse nature of our country that we're trying to cover as well as we can. We're not perfect. We have difficulties in telling that Canadian story from time to time, but we're better for experiences like this, and we really appreciate your time here in Winnipeg, and we really appreciate this this wonderful building that we're in, the Museum of Human Rights here in Manitoba, which is quite something. And for anybody who's watching this online, if you have the opportunity to come to Winnipeg, to the Museum for Human Rights, then you should do it, because you will leave a better person for having witnessed what is in the exhibits here. For those of you in the room, and we wish those of you online could join us, but unfortunately you're not here, but for those of you in the room, we'll carry on this conversation in a much more informal way. We have some opportunities to chat to you when all this ends. So thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun. We do appreciate the fact that you're here. Thank you. Right. Just a sec. Hold on a minute. Yeah, part of the process when you're going out on Facebook Live and on YouTube is sometimes it takes them a while to actually shut down the system. So, so the mics are still hot out to the